Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, Anne Boudreau, and she's here to share with us her new book, A Human Mosaic: Heal, Renew, and Develop Self-Worth. Is your lack of self-worth holding you back in life? Now, this is a very good question. Every facet of who you are and how you live your life is filtered through your internal sense of self, how worthy you believe you are, and the value you place on yourself as a human being. Our special guest today, Anne Boudreau, is here to share with us exactly how this works. Now, many of you know Anne. She's an inspirational author, coach, and executive who is devoted to helping others develop healthy self-worth. In her book, A Human Mosaic, she reveals how self-worth is a critical element for sustainable personal change. So let's welcome to the show, Anne Boudreau.
Thank you so much, Marianne. It's a joy to be here with you today.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. I have to tell you, once I picked up your book, I could not put it down. I was going through it, reading it. I learned a lot. There are times where I was highlighting things. So I'm sure you probably get that from everybody, right?
I've gotten some great feedback. I've received some great feedback, Marianne, but I think it asks a lot of the reader. It asks the reader that to take that information, that knowledge, and apply it to their life. And, we live in a society where, as you know, people want instant results, instant rewards for their effort. And self-change and self-healing is a gradual process.
Yeah, it's really something that, especially now, going through the time we're going through, I think a lot of people are doing that inner journey, since we really can't go out and do anything, really.
That has been top of my list, actually, in the past 7-8 months in terms of what people have asked me, because so many people have felt so isolated and detached from society, detached from the normal, quote unquote normal. There is no normal in my book, but their busyness of life, which keeps them externally focused. And so they're not really focused on how they feel internally. They're able to sublimate those thoughts and emotions by running here, running there, doing their work, taking care of their children, etc., and going to doctor's appointments. But in this time where we've had to remain somewhat isolated and companies have, told their employees that they need to work from home to stay safe, depending on how you feel about yourself, this has been a big, interesting process where we've seen that those who have some semblance of confidence and self-assurance have dealt with this quite differently from those who lack self-worth and self-understanding. And the differences have been magnified because of the fact they've spent so much time alone and have had to really face these thoughts and emotions that have been percolating within them that they've been able to suppress all these years. But as you know, what we suppress never disappears. And when there's a moment for it to surface into our life, such as has been these past few months, we tend to, feel all those negative thoughts and wounds that we have kept hidden.
Oh, my goodness. There's so much that I want to talk about with that. But before we get too far down the road, why did you decide that now was the time to write this book?
I decided that for me, it was a matter of, there were some issues. I was a business executive for 22 years, and the same issue kept coming to me over and over again in different packages, in different forms, from different types of personalities. But it was always something is lacking, something is missing. And I knew from my own journey of low self-worth that I knew what that missing element was and would always be unless one was willing to work on themselves. And that is low self-worth, which is low self-value. And unless you are able to develop a healthy self-worth, as I call it, one will always continue searching for that. What am I doing wrong? What's missing? And also harboring this inner tension that develops within us between who we really are, what I call our soul self, our true self, and who we think we ought to be or should be to be accepted and loved. And so we carry these conflicting, what I call cognitive dissonance in our brain with our who we really are, our beliefs, and our behavior. And so it is very, very important to dig down deep and really identify and become more intimate with yourself if you want to feel that your life is healthy and fulfilling. And so what happened to me is I got to the point where work really was not fulfilling any longer. I was earning a big salary, which was comforting on from one standpoint, but I was also feeling unfulfilled, discontent. And I had lived this way for years, for 4 decades of my life, until I finally realized that I couldn't go on this way. And so I started working on myself because I'm a big believer in self-healing. And that's what happened to me. One day in the business world, and I was working for this huge company, and I was the marketing director, and something happened. Someone was very rude to me for no reason at all. And I said, okay, that's it. I want to take the lead of my own life. I'm not happy. I'm not fulfilled. And I resigned and left a couple weeks later and started writing this book. So it was a combination of my own internal need to express myself and what I'd learned through my own journey of low self-worth, coupled with the fact that I had worked with so many people throughout my career that also lacked self-worth, but didn't even realize it, didn't even realize that what was ailing them was the fact that they really were not connected with their true self and they didn't believe in themselves.
That's probably why they're lashing out at you, because they're really kind of mirroring how they feel about themselves.
No question about it. And when we're young, we don't realize that. As young children, we're not taught that typically by our parents. And we are also not taught coping mechanisms. So when someone is mean to us as a child, in my case, I was bullied, we never knew how to deal with it, how to cope with it. So we just shoved it deep within us. And, as most of us do, we don't learn how to cope or respond to negativity. And so what we do is internalize it and believe that there's something wrong with us when it really isn't us at all. It's just that's what we learn from our society.
Yeah, I know back in the day, there was no, coping mechanisms. They didn't even have terminology like that. It was like
No.
you fight your own battles, or you toughen up, or you
That's
just
right.
deal with it, and none of that works. So
No, I mean, I never had anyone that asked me as a young child, or even later into my adulthood, how do you feel about yourself, Anne? How are things going with you? I mean, times are different now. Families are more openly communicative with one another. But I didn't grow up that way. I don't know if you did, Marianne. But I did not grow up with parents. Yeah, no. Yeah, that's the thing. In my age, my parents were very focused on their work, or my dad's work, social life, and whether I went to school or not, or how well I did on my grades. So most of us as young children develop an overly fixated orientation towards outside of us, our external self, rather than focusing on developing our inner core selves, which is really the heartbeat of our life.
And most people don't even know how to get there. And that's why I found your book to be so profound, because it's really kind of helping people to look at their lives in a new way.
Oh, thank you. That's a beautiful way of putting it. I think, for millions of people, they live their lives without knowing themselves intimately, without feeling that they're worthy. And that is something that I believed when I set out to write this book had not really been explicitly stated. We've always mentioned self-esteem, which is a part of who we are. It's what we do in the world. But there wasn't much focus on how you feel about yourself internally. And how we view ourselves is really the nucleus. Has the greatest impact on every facet of our lives. Our self, what I call our self-concept, has profound impact on the total quality of our lives. And it's of vital importance to our overall mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health. And also to the fact that we have assurance within ourselves that we can achieve our goals and ambitions. A lot of times people don't even try to help themselves because they've failed so many times before. They don't believe they can do it. They think that, something's going to squelch their effort. But when you learn to believe in yourself, you understand that no matter, even if you make a mistake, it's okay, because it's human to make a mistake, but it's superhuman to still respect and love yourself when you do make a mistake. So low self-worth has a way of creeping into one's life and really undermining a lot of what we do without people even realizing it.
And it has me thinking, I think a lot of times people look at the word self-worth and, you hear this kind of everywhere. They're kind of like buzzwords that you see on Instagram and there's lots of flowers and sparkles. But, at the end of the day, we want to really know what this is about. And I'd love for you to share with us the definition of self-worth.
I'd be delighted to, because there is a lot of misunderstanding around it. Even when I came up with the title of my book and talked about self-worth versus self-esteem, there was still not a comfort level with the word self-worth. It's starting to become more common now, but self-worth is different from self-esteem. Self-worth is how we value our inner core selves, which is separate from how we look, what we do, our performance in life. That is self-esteem. That's what I call our outside self, is self-esteem, and how good we are, how confident we are in our competence. Whereas self-worth is how we value ourselves, what we believe about ourselves. And most of us have grown up with a very critical inner voice that was developed either consciously or subconsciously as we evolved through life. And it was based on experiences that we had as younger children, where we were judged on our performance, on what we did, on our parents or caregivers, teachers, coaches set expectations for us to perform a certain way. And when we didn't, we could taste and smell and see the disappointment in their eyes. And so we internalized that and started to think, I didn't do well today on my exam. I didn't make that last goal that we needed in my soccer game to win the game. So obviously there's something wrong with me. And those things start to amass, and they start to amass so to the point where we ignore how we're feeling inside, and we're totally focused on what we're doing outside in the world so that we can please others, so that we can be accepted. And I fall right into that category. I lived, 40 years of my life thinking I had to perform to be loved, to be accepted, to be trusted, and not to be alienated because of the bullying incident that I had as a young child. It really made me feel as though I was an alien walking around just waiting for the shoe to drop, just somebody to say something horrible to me. And so I did my best to please everybody in my world, and thought that was the only way that I would be loved and accepted. So it was a really tough way to grow up, and a lot of people have had far rougher than I have. But I felt it was very important to clarify how much self-worth affects the quality of a person's life. I mean, people don't realize it affects your energy, your attitude, your focus, concentration, your immune system, sleep patterns, your ability to heal from illness, your sexuality. Every relationship we have, every interaction we have at the grocery store, at the dry cleaners, whatever, is somehow impacted by how we feel about ourselves. It tarnishes and erodes some of the joy in our lives. And I thought it was very important to be able to write about it clearly so that people realized, this is what I've been battling with all along. I've been battling with the fact that I don't think I'm worthy.
Well, what an incredible aha moment you had, because a lot of times people go through life feeling that they're not worthy, they don't have that level of self-worth worth that they should. And then, they don't really see what's happening because, when we look at how they perceive everything in life, it's all based on that lens.
It absolutely is. And the greatest gift, as I write about in my book, that anyone can give to themselves is to rid themselves of those toxic, negative, painful thoughts, wounds, memories, and make room for positive, inspirational, motivational thinking and truly optimism. I think a lot of us don't feel the glass is full, don't feel that optimistic sense inside of us because we don't feel that way about ourselves. We don't believe in ourselves enough that to be able to live in the present with joy. And low self-worth steals a lot of joy. People, you hear all the time, live in the present, live in the moment. But people have a hard time grasping what it's like to live in the moment. And truly, it's almost impossible to do so unless you're so highly skilled at blocking your thoughts and emotions, A, or B, you just will not try to live in the moment because you're completely submerged with thoughts that are recycling in your head about how you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not thin enough. All those nagging critical voices that tend to dominate our lives, even when we don't realize it. They're recycled throughout, and unless one is willing to challenge themselves to face those thoughts and release them, they're going to continue living with those thoughts, for a long, long time. So my book asks a lot of the reader, but, I always tell people when they say, how do I know what to do? I know what I should be doing. I know how to fix this or fix that. But how can I really learn to like myself? And it's very simple. It's just like learning to ride a bike or learning to tie your shoe or learning how to play the violin. It's a matter of retraining your brain to fully accept, fully love and honor and respect who you are. And anyone is capable of doing that through the process of neuroplasticity or retraining your brain. And to me, that really was the golden jewel that I found in writing my book, because I didn't know anything about neuroplasticity before my research started. And when I learned how amazing and remarkable the brain was, I thought, this is it. No one can ever say to me again, I'll never be able to change. I never have been able to change, and I'm stuck in this rut forever. So that was for me the really monumental change and difference in my book, is that a lot of people say these wonderful things to yourself, do these things and you'll feel better. But the truth is, you have to retrain your thinking in order to really believe it yourself.
Yeah, I would think that, these simple affirmations that you often hear people say, oh, just say this every day and you're going to feel great. Sometimes that probably isn't getting you there because if someone's in this place where they're not really feeling worthy, maybe that doesn't resonate with them.
It doesn't. And I'm guilty of writing them too. I write a lot of them on Facebook, and they're very pithy, short-lived, inspirational thoughts. It's like, I think Hoda Kotb wrote a book with her favorite inspirational quotes. And they're lovely to look at and reflect on, but they're still not going to change who you are internally. And the truth is, nothing will change you internally until you're willing to do the work. So, one can read any books that they'd like, including mine. One can absorb as much knowledge and information and techniques as they can, or see a counselor, or go to group therapy, or to speak with their friends. But at the end of the day, you wake up with yourself, you go to sleep with yourself. And so it is up to you to create the sustainable change within yourself, to not just read something and toss it aside, but really apply it to your life. And I'm proof, without a doubt, as are some of my clients, that if you're willing to put in some time, the focus, the commitment, and most importantly, that you honestly, deep down in your gut, believe that you can change, then you can start the process. And I am proof positive that I changed myself 360 degrees. I mean, nobody knew what I felt because I was so masterful at concealing it from other people. But I was so sensitive and afraid. And today, I'm a totally different person, only because I took the time to understand myself and to go through the practices that I've applied in my book and applied them to my life over a series of time, and healed myself from the wounds and the pain and the insecurity that I was feeling that was eating me up alive my whole life. But I didn't honor it. I just subsumed it, which is what most of us do.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of times people don't know what else to do, or that there's even an issue there. So, they just kind of go on, living their lives as if, this is how it is,
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So it makes it so difficult, but it's so encouraging and I think empowering for people to hear, your story, because I mean, how many, I've worked in the corporate world too. Most of those people are very unhappy. So,
Yes.
I mean, you're there and you've been able to get beyond all of that. I mean, how empowering is that?
It's pretty great. I will tell you. People say to me in talks that I've given, well, is it just that one day you decide that you like yourself and you accept yourself and all of a sudden the world is, beautiful? And I always say, no, it is a process. Each one of us is so unique and different that what will work for one may not work for another. But the truth is that it does work. And just as you learn a new language, you can learn how to accept and honor yourself. And people are very skeptical because they feel that they've been this way for so long. How can they change themselves? And it's step by step by step. And we always, when you are born into the world, this is one important point to make. No infant is born with high or low self-worth. They aren't. They come in, with genetic predisposition to be a mathematician or an artist, a singer, or, someone who's more quiet, introverted versus extroverted. But they have no basis for self-worth, for how they value themselves relative to the world. And it's only in the very beginning of their lives, and maybe even in utero, that they begin to trust other people or distrust, depending on how they're taken care of or not taken care of. And that's the process that begins to thread how someone's self-worth develops as a very, very, very young infant. If you are not fed and ignored, and your diaper's not changed, and you're not, you're ignored for hours at a time and left in a room, the tendency, of course, will be not to trust other people. But if you're taken care of and loved, and your parents look at you in your eye, or your caregivers, and nurture you, the tendency will be to develop trust. And that translates into self-trust. And so we develop our own sense of trust based on how we encounter our environment, our earliest learning environment. And the ability to change yourself is as simple yet as complex, but as simple as taking the time and learning to become intimate with yourself. And just as you would if you wanted to learn Mandarin, you study, you practice, you write, you research. That is what goes into, as we learn low or high self-worth when we're born, we can unlearn bitter and negative feelings about ourselves and change and become very self-assured and self-aware and comfortable within our own skin. One of my favorite writers, Mark Twain, wrote, "The worst loneliness is not to be comfortable with yourself." And when I found that quote, "The worst loneliness is not to be comfortable with yourself," by Mark Twain. And when I read that and I was in the process of healing myself, I thought, oh my gosh, I have never been comfortable with myself. I've portrayed to others that I'm confident, self-assured, intelligent, etc., well-traveled, but I've never felt that way. And so I have spent a lot of time in my life feeling lonely. And that's another part that people don't realize, that when they suffer from low self-worth, and this COVID has, of course, created a whole different culture of anxiety and loneliness and depression and resurgence of addiction, it's because they haven't been able to be intimate with themselves and be comfortable with who they are, or be their own biggest fan and advocate, be their own best friend. And when you learn to fully accept and understand and be compassionate towards yourself, you are comfortable being alone. You are comfortable being anywhere. And even though it may be difficult, but you have that resilience within you and that knowledge that no matter what happens, you have the strength, the inner strength to survive and revive.
So when someone gets to a place of just really loving themselves and having that self-worth, that's what it looks like. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel for them.
Yes. And I want to emphasize that it's not, self-love doesn't cure your problems. It doesn't take away pain. It doesn't give you a blank slate in front of you, or it's not. It basically doesn't predict that things are going to be simple or easy for you. There are always going to be twists and turns and highs and lows in life. But what it does enable you to do is feel okay with yourself. No matter what happens, you know that you're going to survive. And that, to me, is that assurance, that feeling of comfort, of self-confidence, is what the missing void was for me. It was what I was always looking for in another boyfriend, another man, another bigger job, becoming thinner than I already was, getting in great shape, traveling to another country. It was never enough to fill the void of low self-worth. So what self-worth does give you is a feeling of inner peace, of calm, of equanimity, that you are not necessarily in balance all the time, because, just given this past year, we have not been able to balance anything in our lives, but that you have this calmness about you, that you can be in stillness and be comfortable, that you can be in chaos and feel okay. That is the difference. And it might sound a little trite, Marianne, I don't know, but I can tell you from experience that I feel that way, and my clients have also. It's a work in progress, but they've also experienced that same feeling of just a calmness, an inner peace about themselves and the world, which we all need right now more than ever.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah. This time has been really rough on people, particularly because, as I said to you recently, that when the tide is low, the rocks come out. And we've seen a lot of abrasive. We've been surrounded by people who don't agree with us and are abrasive towards us. And we've heard negativity in all aspects of our lives. So what I have told people in the past is that instead of absorbing all that negativity, use this time as a motivator to change yourself. Use this time as a quiet time to look inwardly and let those destructive thoughts surface, so that you can start to understand, what is causing you, the triggers that are causing you to continue to feel that something's missing or that you're not good enough. It's so important to reach that point. Otherwise, and I gave a talk, I gave a talk on a ship a year and a half ago to a group of highly successful business people, highly, highly, highly multimillionaires. And one gentleman in particular from England, he turned 90 on the ship. That was his birthday present. He and his wife were there. And at the end of my talk, which was about my book, he said to me, Anne, lived all these years working hard, very privileged life, and I've never known what that little twitch in my brain was. And that little twitch in my brain was that I never thought I was good enough, so I had to work myself into a stew and make all this money to prove to myself that I am good enough. And now I know that it was never It was that lack of self-belief, that lack of self-value, that, yes, it did drive me to achieve, but it also drove me to almost kill myself. I was never happy. I was always looking for more. So that was fascinating to me. People can go and live an entire life and still not really know themselves.
Yeah, I think books like yours help people to really start asking some of the deeper questions about their lives, going, okay, because you see this a lot in the corporate world. People work like tons of hours, get paid great. They're miserable, absolutely miserable, but they're doing whatever they can to hit that next quota or make the boss happy or whatever the case is. And a lot of times I think they get mistaken as people pleasers as opposed to someone that maybe needs to look at their self-worth and work on that.
Exactly. We develop as we grow. As I said, it starts in our youth, early youth. We develop this armor, or what I call this veil or facade around ourselves of what we believe we ought to be or should be to please ourselves and to please others. But that's a fictitious facade. And what happens is the more we think and behave as with a result in mind, thinking that if we do this, the conditional if then, if I'm successful, then people will respect me and I'll like myself more. When we behave in that way, what we're doing is actually degrading ourselves and creating this large gap, this large tension between who we really are in our core and who we believe we ought to be. And it's like a rubber band being pulled tauter and tauter the older you get. And so, and we see popular examples in society of people who are very successful, very powerful, even the president of our country. But it is obvious to everyone that there's something missing, that there's a feeling of unworthiness that is making them respond to other people or respond to situations the way they do. And so it does, as I said, it's important to begin the process of self-change and self-healing. You have to kind of come to the decision in your mind that I believe that I can change. And so many people have given up on themselves. They just say, I am who I am. And, I'm going to live feeling unfulfilled for the rest of my life. And that to me is heartbreaking. I interviewed so many people for my book who had been through tremendous trauma, far worse than what I've experienced. But they were able to get to the other side and able to realize that living in that horrible, horrific state was eventually going to kill them. And so, they rose to, they either turned to faith or they turned to counseling, or in some cases they were clients of mine, and said, I've been so low that my only choice is to change. And sometimes, unfortunately, that's what it takes people to stimulate them, to catalyze them to want to work on themselves. That's why I wanted to write my book, to show that really it's not hard to change. It just takes an investment of time and energy and the passion to want to change.
I think a lot of times when people hear about making changes, they think that this is going to take, years to do. And perhaps for some people it does, but what's your experience been?
When I came to the crossroads intersection of my life where I was suffering deeply, my father had died, and I was in a deep depression, and everything came to the surface for me, that I really was living for other people's acceptance, not my own, and that I'd ignored my own inner self. I was ready. I was more than ready. I was kind of on that breaking point, just as some of my clients have been. So I wish that people didn't have to get to that point, because when you're at that point, you're willing to do anything to help yourself. But when I started doing my own research, I knew everything that I had kept inside. I mean, I wore it I kept it held within, but I knew what had caused me to feel the way I felt because they were blatant circumstances in my life, so I couldn't ignore them. But just as you would, going back to learning a new instrument, let's say you're trying to learn how to play the harp. In the beginning, it's kind of so much work and reading the notes and feeling the instrument and feeling the strings. They hurt my fingers. And so the beginning is the hardest. And there's setbacks along the way, but you can change a habit in a matter of weeks. If a person can change a habit or a thought in a matter of weeks, if they want to, I've come up with some processes, one in particular for one of my younger clients, a 16-year-old girl, called the language of self-worth, because she so badly, so desperately wanted to fit in with the other kids in her class. But being on the autistic scale, she obviously had some differences. And so she said, I want to believe myself. I want to believe myself so badly, but I don't know how. So I said, begin in this simple way. Start transposing phrases in yourself. When you say, I'm so anxious, I'll never be able to do this. Say, I'm trying to be less anxious. I'm trying to relax more. I'm trying to not hate myself so much. And the more she spoke to herself, the more she observed those thoughts and really became conscientious and conscious about making changes, the more she changed. And with her, I thought it was going to take a year or so long, but within 6 weeks, with someone who has OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and autism, we had arrived at a point where she was starting to really enjoy herself, which to me was, heart thrilling, heartwarming on every conceivable level. So if you are really ready and passionate about changing, you can make small incremental changes every day. And within a few weeks, you'll see differences in your thought stream, in your behavioral patterns. It doesn't take years. Obviously, there's some more serious clinical issues, psychological issues that need professional counseling or therapy. You need attention from a therapist, a psychologist, or a psychotherapist. But if you feel you are capable of changing these negative thoughts yourself by using my book in concert with practices, in concert with outside help if you need it, it takes a matter of months, a month, 2 months, 3 months. In my case, I was so far along because I knew what the triggers were that caused me to feel bad about myself. And so I was able to address those. But it took me a long time to forgive the people that bullied me. It took me a long time to forgive them because it was so cruel and it was never addressed by my parents or by anyone. So I had to live with those terrible feelings about myself for years and years and years. But when you're ready, begin. And even if you take a step back, commit to the process of change. Make it a personal pledge to yourself, because we're about to start a new year, and change is exciting. Change is personal change. There's nothing more exciting than to see yourself commit to something and think, wow, I'm really making a change in myself. And my brain is loving every minute of that. Your brain thrives on new knowledge, new information, new skill sets. So it's just waiting for you to take it by the reins, to take your brain and lead it in a new direction. It's healthy for your brain to change and grow. And your brain changes by developing new neural pathways that will eventually replace the former pathways that were filled with negative and critical experiences. And, it's a fabulous process that the brain can replace pathways that are no longer useful to you with new neural pathways that are positive thoughts, positive habits. And so what I love about this, that it's not just statements, pithy statements or inspirational messages or saying you can be vulnerable, you can be strong, all these things. It's scientifically proven that we can rewire our thoughts and behavior. And that, to me, takes the guesswork out of it.
What if somebody is kind of trying to decide whether or not that they have, something about their self-worth that they should take a look at? I know you talk about maybe like a negative mindset is one of the kind of markers that they should be looking for. What are some of the other traits that you commonly see?
Negative mindset is really that is expressed in many different ways. But what I've seen amongst the people I've interviewed and the clients that I have is that sabotages their goals and their ability to transform, or the ability to do something that they want to achieve, a goal that they want to achieve, is self-doubt. Self-doubt is huge, and lack of self-trust. And when we have self-doubt about ourselves and we lack self-trust about ourselves, it changes the composition of your relationships in life. It puts a dark cloud that can be heavy or can be a little bit lighter, but it's always omnipresent. In a relationship, a lot of the people that I have dealt with have lacked self-trust in themselves, and therefore, and self-trust is really one of the most important tenets of self-worth. Until you trust yourself, it's very difficult to grow and develop a healthy self-worth. And self-trust leads to not trusting others, and so it really becomes a detriment in intimate relationships in particular. When you're doubting yourself, obviously you're also doubting others. And so it's very important to learn how to trust yourself. And the way to do that is to develop a steadfast list or steadfast set of values for yourself that you will adhere to no matter what. And this is when people get into real heavy mindset of self-doubt, when they say they're going to do something either for themselves or for other people, and they don't do it, or they tell a lie and they feel shame and guilt and insecurity, or they, so I always tell people that the most important step you can take in developing self-trust is to create a set of values for yourself, that you will be honest, you will live with integrity, you will be responsible and do what you say you're going to do. And the more you do that, the more you adhere to your own values and they become part of who you are, the greater you will feel. You'll start to feel really, really excited about yourself and your life because you believe in yourself. You know that you're not going to let yourself down and therefore not let someone else down. So a lot of what I see in other people is more of, I don't trust myself to be able to give a great speech, or to, another thing that is very, common is that they're constantly battling themselves so much that it gets in the way of their ability to interact with other people in a positive manner. So you're constantly battling with yourself and telling yourself you're stupid, you're this, you're that. And so having a very strong, beautiful, resonant connection with other people is impeded by the fact that you're constantly worried about yourself and battling yourself. And so there are a myriad of different things. A lot of people spend time comparing themselves to others in a very negative way and feeling that they'll never have what other people have. And that is also a very heavy, heavy weight on someone's ability to change and to heal. And so I've always stipulated with myself that I'm not going to compare myself to others. I am a unique human being. People are going to like me and they're not going to like me. Sometimes I'm going to do well. Sometimes I'm not going to do well. Sometimes I'll even trip. But that's okay. We're human. And, unfortunately today it's become so hard for people to accept themselves because, there are a lot of things that have changed. Bigotry has, again, been a huge factor in our society, and hatred and bullying and addiction, suicides have risen. And so, it's become much more difficult for people to breathe and feel okay with themselves. But it's also the most important time to make the changes so that you can withstand what's going on outside of you. Does that answer your question?
It does. And to kind of dovetail with what you just said, when we look at everything that we're going through, and you mentioned, bullying, violence, addictions, anger, hostility, there's loneliness and suicide. All these things that are taking place right now seem to be so elevated. Do you feel that, this has the core root of this is the self-worth core, or is all of this also coming up because it's something as a society we really need to deal with?
That's a fabulous question. I think it's both. It's a combination of both. To borrow the common adage of today, it's the perfect storm of scenario where when you feel inner dislike, inner discomfort, inner tension, and things are happening around you that are unstable and uncertain, of course, it exacerbates how you're feeling. But also, I think that society is really reacting and responding to issues that have been latent or that have been kind of pushed down, that now are getting the attention that needs to be. I mean, just Black Lives Matter movement is a huge example of something that has existed, the bigotry and the racism and institutionalized racism, systematic racism, has existed for centuries. And it's almost taken this perfect storm of negative events to allow that pain and that anger and the hostility that has been experienced towards them, the crime, the awful crime, the killings, has allowed all of these thoughts and emotions to manifest in a way we've never seen before. And so, on the one hand, it's causing a lot of trepidation and a lot of unrest. But on the other hand, we almost needed that to open the volcano and let it all come out. Do you agree with me, Marianne, on that?
I do. It feels like it's something that while society, maybe they don't have time to deal with, just as a whole, our society has had its own self-worth issue. It hasn't dealt with these things and hasn't really come to terms with, making this right. Whatever this is, we've got a lot of things that we need to work on as a society.
We certainly do. And actually, I love the way you put that. Our self-worth as a society. That is really fabulous. I've never heard anyone say that, but it's so true. When you judge someone by their religion or how they look or how much money they have or what language they speak, it's really reflects back to that person. It's not, one cannot help what they look like or how, where they came from or what religion they choose necessarily. And so I think all this stuff that's come out was there. It just now has a place to kind of unleash itself. And so now we have to try to, as I write, as the title of my book, the subtitle, we have to heal and renew ourselves. We have to renew and rebuild and recreate a different culture, an accepting, inclusive culture. And I find, to answer a question that you raised before that I never really addressed, I find that the worst atrocities in life are propagated by those who suffer from severe low self-worth. If you look at Hitler or Mussolini or any of the tyrants that we've had, even Kim Jong-un, it's been noted that they have suffered from narcissism, which is rooted in low self-worth. And so I think that for us, in order to move beyond this, you're right, we need to learn to value people and to value ourselves first and foremost. I talk about in my book about becoming your own best friend, and it sounds silly to some people, but until I put myself first and realize that I have a lot to offer, and that it doesn't matter what I look like or what I sound like, or if I trip over my words or whatever, I have a lot to offer, and no one can take that away from me. So I have become my own closest friend and confidant, and it really is a very freeing, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually freeing concept that you can be your own best friend and that no one can take away what you have inside of you. So I loved Viktor Frankl, and quote him, talk about him in my book, that he survived the Nazi concentration camps by constantly envisioning in his mind the love he had for his wife, and that kept him alive. And so, I emphasize the power of one's brain. People take their brain for granted, but I know how powerful the brain is. And if it can keep someone alive in a concentration camp, then one can certainly put their brain to use to change their insecurities and their toxic thoughts about themselves into accepting, loving, compassionate, supportive thoughts. I know we've talked about a lot because this is a broad subject, obviously, but
well, it seems to also be so timely. It's a subject where, as an generation, as just organizations, people, everybody is, I think, in one way or another, you're dealing with this, and it's just a very timely discussion. And I hope it's not. I think you do amazing work, but I hope it's not timeless too. I hope we get to the end of this at some point and move beyond the self-worth issue and really start loving ourselves like we should.
We do. We need to. I mean, it takes away this tightrope beneath you. It allows you to breathe deeply and feel okay with your breaths. I mean, it takes away that undercurrent of nausea and tension and anxiety, and that's so unnecessary in life. It breaks my heart when I talk to some people. It does, because when I hear how miserable they are, and I'm on one of these low self-esteem and anxiety groups, and I do a little bit of counseling, and I just hear the saddest, most tragic things said. And I think, if I could give each one of these persons a vial of, instead of the COVID vaccine, give them a vial of self-love, it would be life-changing. And it really is something that is attainable for anyone. I cannot emphasize that more. It's a matter of retraining your brain to heal from your past and to move forward with real love for and honor for who you are as a person in this one life that you have on earth as we know it. I mean, a lot of people believe in other lives and everything, and that's great too. But in this form, as you are now, this is your chance to really get to the point where you feel healthy mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually.
And for even people who believe in reincarnation or other things like that, I mean, we still have to deal with this reality, right?
Exactly.
Be the best person we can be now.
That's right. And believe that ourselves. Because people will tell you all sorts of things about yourself. And, one of the things that I guess it was one of the philosophers, Descartes, said, "I think, therefore I am." And I always counsel people, no, just because you have thoughts that are floating in your head, they're not fact and they're not necessarily true. You can change those thoughts anytime you're ready to change them. That your thoughts aren't necessarily right. And especially when they're thoughts about yourself that are derisive and demeaning. So change those thoughts. And in my book, I have practices, and, I also just believe in, if you're ready to change, the time is right now. And I think that one positive person can impact this world in such resounding ways. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is just touch whoever I can with the notion that anyone can change if they're ready to do so.
It's kind of like that drop in the ocean. We never know what the effect is going to be, but there is
That's
an effect.
right.
There's a ripple effect that happens. And being the one person who stands up and says, you know what, I'm working on my self-worth today and my own personal value, as I am. I mean, how empowering is that?
It's huge, and it engenders respect from people. People like to hear that because that gives them hope that they can also start to feel better about themselves. And that's what we aren't communicating well today. And part of that is a product of Zoom and things like that, and not being socially interactive the way we've been used to doing. But even on a macro level, we really don't communicate in an open, trustworthy, optimistic manner. And I see day in and day out how just the tone of how you speak to someone and the questions you ask can impact someone else, not just for that moment, but for that day, for that week. And it's brilliant. If we all felt good about ourselves, imagine what a friendly and inclusive and loving world we'd live in.
Yeah, that really makes such a difference. My goodness, Anne, I mean, we could talk for hours. That's not a problem,
Yeah. Well,
But I
that's
really,
true.
yeah, but I really felt like your book, A Human Mosaic, is so impactful, and that's why it's like, okay, we have to spend this time really talking about this, and we're not even touching the tip of the iceberg on this, but where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your work? And let's say they purchased your book and they just need a little bit more help. How do they go about doing that?
They can contact me through my website, which is www.anne, A-N-N-E, middle initial O, last name Boudreau, BOUDREAU.com. That's AnneOBoudreau.com. I'm also on Facebook. I have an author page, and I take any and all correspondences, any emails you'd like to send me, either through Facebook or through my website. I'm very responsive. Obviously, this is my mission, and I'm honored to be here with you, Marianne, and thank you so much for giving me this time and this platform to speak to you.
Well, thank you, Anne. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, A Human Mosaic. Heal, renew, and develop self-worth. A Human Mosaic's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and select indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And of course, it's available on Kindle, so you can download and start reading right now. Again, if you'd like to connect with Anne, you can at languageofselfworth.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.